The work I've been showing here is paintings I've had created for the past 20 years. They're only details. This is a different presentation. Normally you just show up, your work as it is. But I just thought I would change it a bit. So it's just mainly small details of these pieces. Some of them are paintings, some of them are drawings, mixed media, and so on. So thank you. And it's 9:35. Right. I was born in a society that has made gender violence against women one of its indelible and well-recognized marks, not only to its inhabitants, but recognized by many around the world. The vast majority of Mexicans have to learn to avoid many types of violence at all costs, many types. They have to avoid becoming closely entangled with the tentacles that emanate from them. Our violence is perpetrated to various genders in a horrific way, and in a country like mine, I have learned that they speak to each other. Acts of violence in Mexico have been front-page news for decades. Like most Mexicans who grew up during a period marked by the drug wars and the inexorable growth in power, influence, and violence of narco-trafficking cartels, some expressions ended up becoming part of our common language. Things like enforced disappearances, feminicide, organ trafficking, clandestine graves, serial murders, sexual exploitation of children, spectacular massacres, torture, forced labor, human trafficking, beheadings, mutilation, kidnappings, gas theft, and I can continue. These are still happening today, and they are forming an intricate waving being left to grow by the structures of many groups with specific interests. Its cohesion is strong, and its consequences have already reached other parts of the world. The state I was born is located in the central region of Mexico. In here, there are 3 of the main abducting areas for human trafficking in the country. These include the city of Tlaxcala, the city of Tepeaca, which is just 10 minutes away from my community, and the capital, the city of Puebla, which just 40 minutes away. My home city also borders with Mexico City, our country's capital, which ranks in the 4th place at national level for human trafficking. According to the figures presented by the National Search Commission in 2021, the state of Mexico ranks first nationally in accumulated cases of disappearance of girls, adolescents, and women. In a report from the same commission, they also expressed. The aim is to understand the relationship between human trafficking for sexual exploitation and the disappearance of children and women in the context of the criminal practices that take place in the state of Mexico. To understand these disappearances, the existence of a possible causal relation between disappearance and trafficking was established as an hypothesis. This is the third in the number of previous investigations for human trafficking and a growing increase in the presence of organized crime. To give you an idea of the scale, from 2015 to 21, there were close to 20,000 women disappeared. Among these, 12,632 were girls and adolescents. To tackle gender violence in a country like Mexico, it has required us to look deeper into other forms of violence. Back in 2006, the so-called war on drugs was declared by former President Felipe Calderón. This, many analysts have agreed, triggered violence to levels never seen before. The Mexican writer and journalist Juan Villoro described it as, in Mexico, we were sitting on dynamite. And Calderón lit a match to prove it. It is hard to ignore all injustices, but it is harder to begin to understand them. As many journalists, activists, and social fighters have experienced it, the search for the truth in Mexico can mean the risk of losing your life or the life of your loved ones. I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I am trying to put on the table all these horrendous situations to be able to say that gender violence in a country like Mexico is a violence that also knows how to attack every gender in horrific ways. For the purpose of this conference, I'll be focusing mainly on women, but I must state that the violence is overwhelmingly brutal also to genders affecting men, boys, LGBTQ+, and many others. I could not possibly ignore these cases, but I do think that unless we secure the rights for all, there will always be a way for violence to return. According to the definition from the explanatory report to the Istanbul Convention, gender-based violence is based on an imbalance of power and is carried out with the intention to humiliate and make a person or a group of people feel inferior and or subordinate. This type of violence is deeply rooted in the social and cultural structures, norms and values that govern society, and is often perpetrated by a culture of denial and silence. Gender-based violence can happen in both the private and public spheres, and it affects women disproportionately. Gender-based violence can be sexual, physical, verbal, psychological, or socioeconomic, and it can take many forms, from verbal violence and hate speech on the internet to rape or murder. It can be perpetrated by anyone, a current or former spouse, partner, a family member, a colleague from work, schoolmates, friends, an unknown person, or people who act on behalf of cultural, religious, state, or interstate institutions. Gender-based violence, as with any type of violence, is an issue involving relations of power. It is based on a feeling of superiority and an intention to assert that superiority in the family, at school, at work, in the community, or in society as a whole. This definition is what will allow me today to try and explore with you how, from the depths of violence, its meaning and consequences, not only real but also aesthetic, are leading us to a fierce battle among genders. It will be a miracle if I had to come to this conference with answers. I'm afraid I don't have them. The closest thing I will get to will be portraying, as a painter does, an image brought from afar, from a land called Mexico. And although it hurts, the pain is not only mine, and it is also shared by many others. This reading will try to portray just a small part of what was built, a structure that stands up to today, and it is very much alive. This is invariably due to the repercussions and that new formations are appearing so that these practices can continue to be spread. When I was invited to participate in this event, I decided to begin by writing a series of questions, since it is easier for me to start by questioning my knowledge, or the lack of it, perhaps to know how lost I am on the subject. This is how I start my paintings, somewhat lost. And later, when the painting progresses, I sink into a hole of confusion. And to get out of there, I turn my will to poetry. Some of the questions were as follows. What do I know about gender? What type of violence do I know of and recognize to have accepted? What type of violence did I first encounter, which I knew as harming? When was I scared for my own life? What type of violence I have encountered, which I thought was unbearable? When did I first felt an injustice to have happened to me? When was the first time I got physically attacked? When was I not safe? How did I escape and overcome all these violences? And after all that, how and why am I still here? The Mexican Marcela Lagarde is an anthropologist and politician. She created the concept of feminicide to refer to the crimes, kidnappings, and disappearance of women and girls in Ciudad Juárez. And she also succeeded in creating a special commission on feminicide in the Mexican Congress. The concept sisterhood is also hers. This is understood as the recognition and unity of women. Between 1990 and 2011, Mexico ranked first in the death rate concerning attacks on women on 11 occasions. What to say when a society produces violent individuals and puts communities against each other, making them fear everything and everyone, to make people defenseless, dismissed by authorities whose defining inefficiency and corruption promote the phenomenon itself. Where can we start to try and comprehend everything that allows for this to happen? How do we begin to understand the circumstances, the way in which these forms of violence are perpetrated, the motivations of those who carry them out, the territorial space in which they take place, the social and cultural practices that sustain them, and the values that animate them? What a task is trying to pinpoint the problems arising from these eviscerating situations. Part of the issue might reside in the ways we conform complex systems. We hardly simplify things, and we certainly can't create complex systems alone. When trying to track down the root for a specific act of violence, we hardly encounter the single root that will explain it all. Violence is complex, yet this complexity creates confusion, and we won't understand it if we are confused. This is a crucial point where to avoid the straight paths, the cutting lines that traverse an intricate problem. With complete disregard to its complexity, we can create more damage than already is. Perhaps one of the most difficult things to do is reaching a position where we are open to see, to critique and to accept criticism, observing the violence and finding ways to resist it by guiding it to find a way out of its destructive quality. And what to think about the impacts that aggressive aesthetics have to contribute to neurotic or depressive states, or even the impacts of the almost normalized, stressful lifestyles we have chosen to live. Violence, we know, it is also an aesthetic force. It lives an exterior construction that, for the most part, it is visually consumed. It has to make itself constantly present. We could think, for instance, on where are violent crimes committed. Studies show that most are done in marginalized places, where the aesthetic environment can immediately let you know that you are entering a hostile place. Buildings or houses with low quality structure, neglected, worn, torn, and often in a state of chaos. Spaces we know that women have developed an intuition to feel naturally insecure, even though we know there is nothing natural about it. How much does it really affect us to observe a broken space, dirty, cold, places that nullify our existence, and makes us feel as if disappearing? What can these spaces do to our senses on a daily basis? How many times do we enter the spaces and want to vanish quickly from there for fear of being brutally taken? We are visual beings, and we like ensuring this language is put at the command of our desires, aspirations, and goals. We can also identify austerity, for example. An almost empty room with one piece of furniture and a bed points us to the precarious estates of things. But we also know how to create decorum, as well as places of power. I don't know about you, but I also feel insecure in places full of lavish wealth. As a woman, I know that comes to a cost. So how does power look like? In The Human Condition, Arendt wrote, "Power is only reality where the word and the act have not been separated, where the words are not empty and the actions are not brutal, where words are not used to veil intentions but to discover realities, and acts are not used to violate and destroy but to establish relationships and create new realities." She's speaking to us of the positive outcome of power, a definition that some will hardly recognize as power. Her idea also helped me bringing together 2 points. One, the way we form communities and how deeply influenced we are by our environment, and the way we communicate our concerns. This also made me remember the social act of lynchings. Lynchings and other similar forms of collective violence are common in many parts of the world, places like India, Guatemala, Mexico, and the United States, where studies suggested this practice originated. The Mexican professor Gustavo Rojas Bravo says lynchings was originally referred to the extrajudicial executions during the United States War of Independence. They were popularized by Colonel Charles Lynch, a Virginia landowner. It was also a practice that expanded rapidly in the 19th century as an essential part of the process of expansion and conquest of that country towards the south and west of the continent. Until half a century ago, they were an act not only of violence, but of profound frontal and brutal racial discrimination as well. While the majority of lynchings were men, we should not forget how the practice also extended to women as well. In contemporary Mexico, they are also serve other purposes. I would like to narrate one of the 1,800 cases of lynchings since 2015. The story has been collected from the BBC World News. In 2022, in the city of Puebla, my city, a rumor spread through WhatsApp and Facebook, saying that there were foreign people in the area kidnapping children to traffic their organs. The 31-year-old man, Daniel Picasso, left his home in Mexico City to visit the house that his grandfather inherited in a small town in the state of Puebla. That Friday night, around 9 p.m., a local resident saw a truck with a license plates from another state and alerted the community through WhatsApp. First, about 30 residents gathered. The police received a call and immediately came to help, but then more than 200 people arrived. The municipal president claims that the police rescued him until more than 200 people arrived to attack the officers. And he declares that unfortunately they couldn't do anything more. According to Picasso's mother, a man who witnessed the incident tried to help his son. The young man says that my soul told him, "Help me, help me." They had him tied up, handcuffed, and on his knees. Almost dying, he told him, "Take my wallet. I have it in my pants." And the witness saw that he had his identification from the chambers of deputies. He wanted to defend my son, but the residents did not let him. There were state and municipal police, but they were also accusing him. What wasn't confirmed in the BBC report was that he was later covered in gasoline and burned alive in the community park. Lynchings are illegal acts that weaken democratic institutions, violate human rights, and more than constituting a form of justice, they contribute to weakening it or making access to it impossible. This form of violence, social violence, happens sporadically, and yet it's always organized and alert. Its strength resides perhaps on the spontaneity of its act. They are done out of anger and fear. They are primarily a consequence of the absence of the rule of law. And in the Mexican case, there is also the poisoning of its corrupted institutions. Due to the state's inability to provide protection to the community, a void is open, making people take justice in their hands. This mass anger annihilates the single person whose crime is punished with a visceral aggression that exhausts itself only through the brutal killing of that individual. That is how violence can attract and release something in us, in a way that traps our impulses and moves our pains, sorrows, and fears. We can dance at unison in that violence, feeded by the other, and vibrate to the sound of a catastrophic melody. I took this case as an example because it makes an emphasis on the fact that he was lynched by the presumption of him being one of the kidnappers of children to traffic their organs. Our anger can take us to unrecognizable states within ourselves when faced with injustices. either upon every act in life, no doubt. Sorry, I was lost. I'm sorry to cut that. While the case I mention here concerns a public act of killing of an innocent man, I can't help but consider how the gender violence we see in our country operates by the same logics. The violence is inseparable from desire. It too operates in an extrajudicial space, which is then subsequently protected by the law. Innocent women and girls are taken from the streets and then violated, abused, or exploited. They are humiliated, they are strangled, and often they die in life. So what is left are charred remains. They are lynched from their lives. I would like to now turn to the issues to aesthetics. When people often look at my work, they ask how can they seem beautiful if they are so violent? These and other questions have made me think, can the formless matter of the abstract be beautiful? But it also makes me think of what is that thing we call beauty. I do recognize here that there are many problems with the way beauty has been presented historically. Beauty, in fact, has been a way to keep others oppressed and a means to normalize oppressive standards. But what I have also learned is to recognize a different concept of beauty, which emanates directly from the tragic. When we observe something beautiful, we sense something that is overwhelming. One simply feels like falling. You surrender and let yourself flow. You want to go through it, to feel it with all its fury, with all the ecstatic futility of it. But the beauty here is not the superficial. That which we call beautiful is but a trace that can never be pinned down. Beauty is an ecstasy that hurts but loves. There is a dagger living in us, but we still walk with it. The beauty of sadness or pain, the tragic beauty of the mystical. Above all, there is perhaps the idea that you feel embraced in your pain by the other. You can recognize you are being understood. In there, you are nothing but an exhausted human being. You are so tired, you feel like touching your heart, burned and destroyed. Your organs are failing and your mind carries the eternal anguish. There is only one thing helping you out of this, another human being. The touch, the recognition, their image, their eyes, their warmth, and only there you find a beauty that exists beyond your comprehension. This is what the beauty in art means to me, because it is human. It only exists because of us. And it is an act of kindness despite its confusions or painful portrayals of the shame of being human, all too human. As a painter, I would say then, be wary of the image, know about its aesthetical power, and always question it. A good image, a well-thought image, will be there to remind you there are no easy explanations, no easy roads to take you out. It won't give you a single solution, so you can escape acts of violence. Yes, violence can be straight cut. You can escape it with an abrupt change. You always have the option to respond with violence to stop it at once. A stronger force can be imposed upon every act in life, no doubt, but it requires more of us not to do so. It takes more from us to harness the tragic beauty within. I would like to connect this to a peoples in my country who know more than most the recurring meaning of tragedy, yet still find beautiful reasons to believe in this world. Last year was the 30th anniversary of the race of the Zapatista Army of National Liberation, ZLN, a movement that awoke my country and brought a new political movement still very much alive today. Of the many important contributions the Zapatistas instigated, we can say that for the first time the role of indigenous women was taken seriously. They were integrated from the beginning. We could also even question how much of the contemporary focal feminist struggle that's become much more visible in the past decade owes the bravery of my indigenous neighbors. In December 1993, the indigenous women created the Revolutionary Woman's Law. The feminist sociologist Silvia Marcos, one of the most recognized scholars of the thought and evolution of the Zapatistas, in her essay, Mexico, Reflections on the Zapatista Struggles, Are They Feminists?, wrote that the Revolutionary Woman's Law cannot be read in the light of any conventional feminist approach, neither theoretical nor practical, since it is inserted in their collective communal life, and it is in there that the achievements can be seen. In her book, Rebel Women, the Indigenous Zapatistas, she pointed out on the importance that they don't have a concept of self-contained individual for either women or men, which is why Zapatista indigenous women demand both the rights of women and the collective rights of peoples. They are not organized hierarchically, and they state one cannot exist without being included and modified by the other. Back in 2016, I was in Chiapas visiting the Zapatistas communities. It is a place that as a Mexican you cannot ignore. It is a movement that has without doubt transformed my country. 2 years later, in December 2017, the Zapatistas women were proud to say on their second international encounter of women rebels that they had no single cases of murder or disappeared women. In contrast, in Mexico, outside of their communities, according to official numbers from 2019 to 2023, 17,000 women, adolescents, and girls have been murdered. In the same years, there were 10,283 women disappeared. One of the important ideas to have emerged from the Zapatistas' knowledge is that there are ways of moving at a different pace, with different ways of constructing better forms of existence, and this requires from us to break through positions that haven't been working to reach the benefits of healthier ways of living. This call to slow things down is something that really resonates with me, both as a painter and as a woman. It is good to come across stories from time to time that help us rethink the structures. Such a story that was also readapted by the Zapatistas was put forward by the Greek philosopher Zeno of Elea, called The Perpetual Race of Achilles and the Tortoise. The exposition of the philosopher G.H. Lewis narrates the story as follows. Achilles, symbol of speed, has to catch up the tortoise, symbol of slowness. Achilles runs 10 times faster than the tortoise and so gives him a 10-meter advantage. Achilles runs those 10 meters, the tortoise runs 1. Achilles runs that meter, the tortoise runs a decimeter. Achilles runs the decimeter, the tortoise runs a centimeter. Achilles runs the centimeter, the tortoise runs a millimeter. Achilles the millimeter, the tortoise the tenth of the millimeter, and ad infinitum, so that Achilles can run forever without catching up, hence the immortal paradox. Now, what can this tell us about walking through life and about time itself? On the one hand, we have a warrior with the gift of being physically invulnerable, and on the other, an animal with the gift of being one of the slowest and oldest on this planet. Yes, a gift, I would say, because when analyzing this situation, without a doubt, history tells us about who is ahead regardless of the speed. That is, you can be very slow in your walk, but the one behind you will always try to catch up and overtake you. If we focus on the logic of this story, we might not find reasons to support it, unless time has slowed down and taken a different course once the turtle begins its path. So much so that when Achilles begins to advance, there will be no way for him to catch up with the turtle, since they are already in a different time. That is, Achilles and the turtle have entered a kind of suspended time, where the one who indicates the time and its speed is the turtle, with its slowness, and not Achilles, with its speed, his speed and strength. Counter to this, if we think of situations that we call reality, those in which we don't want to entertain philosophical or poetic ideas, then tangible examples can take us to the natural situation of things. We cannot appear overnight with the title of professor, just because we know the requirements necessary to obtain the appointment, nor can we become one of the best athletes in the world overnight just by knowing what the training, nutrition, and special equipment they use. Nor can we ignore external factors, those that shape us and to which we adapt to form a life. To achieve certain objectives, time and circumstances tell us that in order to break with this, it requires from a different violence, different forces that will break through set ideas and customs. These are ruptures that can be brutal and open wounds, big wounds, that may not always be for an improvement in the situation. Although, if they become so, then their readjustment can build new possibilities that will conform to their own time and their own resources. This, by being a new perspective, will take years, decades, or even centuries before they can work their way through. It will simultaneously cause havoc, creating its own violence if care is not taken. But taking the time to decide and reconcile with our surroundings is a luxury that we don't always know how to give to ourselves. Regarding time, I was left thinking about the ability to some animals to be slow. And well, the snail is a good example. Those who know about the Zapatistas in Mexico, and especially indigenous women's aesthetics, will know there is a special place reserved for this little creature. Fascinated myself, I was rather delving into the image of its shapes. There is an allusion to time's duality in the shape of its shell. It is a line that can be expanded, but it is also a circular line. Let me explain this a little better. The linear shape could have the potential of being extended as long and as far as it can. While flat, it can start to form into a circular shape by curling in without stopping, forming in this way the shape we all know to be that of a snail shell. I see in here two opposites that make up two ideas of time. One is compressed, the other is extended. One is the horizon, and the other one is an internal vortex. In any case, both can be shaped to reach towards the infinite. Perhaps these are just visual illusions, metaphors, or ways of perceiving and explaining life. And even if an image appears with its potential lying in the details, at times it goes to waste since we prefer to overlook at them. But I am also struck by the power of metaphors, especially those that evoke a sense of gender disruption. An image may refer to time or to dreams formed by desire. All of this reminds me of that story in my culture about the dream of the serpent. To quote the Mexican writer Alberto Ruy on his article, The Dreams of the Serpent, he wrote, "An ancient legend says that we only exist in the dreams of a serpent, the serpent mother of all things, that man occasionally glimpses in his own dreams, according to that legend, all our art, painting, sculpting, drawing of those forces that are beyond our comprehension, may be an attempt to capture the image of the serpent that dreams us into existence. What I do know is the purpose of an image becomes deeply political when it takes hold or is placed in our heads, even engraved in our minds. For if we believe them to be real, then the image has taken our hold of imagination. I am preoccupied by this and how a fantastical world starts its creation, perhaps even deep inside ourselves. Telling stories is part of constructing the world. Our imagination has to go somewhere, and it's better used when we are open to its changes. In 1926, one of the most widely acclaimed writers of our time, especially in Latin America, Jorge Luis Borges, at the end of A History of Angels, ends his thoughts like this. Today, what line of poetry would dare allude to the phoenix or make itself the primate of a centaur? None. But no poetry, however modern, is unhappy to be a nest of angels and to shine brightly with them. I always imagine them at nightfall, in the dusk of a slum or a vacant lot, in that long, quiet moment when things are gradually left alone, with their backs to the sunset, and when colors are like memories or premonitions of other colors. We must not be too prodigal with our angels. They are the last divinities we harbor, and they might fly away. We are in year 2025, almost 100 years after he wrote those lines. Can we think of those angels? With so much technological thinking, I wonder whether we still believe in those angels. Whether you are religious or not, I am not myself. The example goes beyond that. It wants us to keep our imagination on fire, to keep them awake regardless of the circumstances. And he directs his attention especially to the poets, to the greater creators of illusions, of fantasies, and expansions of realities. It seemed to me that he was rather disappointed to see not only that as creators, but as societies, we were separating our lives from those illusions, the capacity to not only believe in creating the impossible, but carrying stories to make sure we could keep moving towards a better future. When I think of those angels, I'm also reminded by what Brett mentioned yesterday, those mothers searching for their loved ones being disappeared. We all have a duty not only to our own lives and our families, but to the communities we inhabit. As a painter and true believer of the power of mysticism, Borges' final paragraph inspires me to keep my optimism alive. It is an imagination that imagines a world freed from the reality of dogmatism, but it is more sensitive than that. Most importantly, I would say that for me, those colors like memories he refers to are to me a reminder of how life intersects with my body to make sure I receive and translate its shapes back into the canvases. As he says, like premonitions of other colors. I am an artist first who happens to inhabit the body of a woman. I don't like categories in art, but I do also recognize that as a woman, I feel the textures of the pain and the roughness of the canvas differently. In painting, I can therefore escape to the insanities of life, the insanities of this world, and explode in with the most painful interiors, when the body is no longer enough, although always necessary. As a painter, I can understand that without this body of mine, the experiences I had could never be painted. I can transform through the power in my own body the things I perceive as reality, and through the senses feel it taking other forms, perhaps that of being like an animal, as well as being fire, wind, water, or earth. Those I know are simply consequences of my imagination. With the title of this talk, they said I was a woman. I wanted to use this as a provocation. I've lived almost every day of my life listening to arguments from various trenches, telling me what a woman is, what as a woman should or shouldn't be. That I should be pretty? No, don't be pretty. Be smart? Don't be too smart. Wear this? Don't wear that. Have children? Don't have children. Be aggressive and tough? No, you better be sweet and gentle. Be obedient? No, be whatever you want to be. It is as if the world has a million opinions, but they have no eyes. I still think we are in a battlefield, sometimes with men and others, but often among ourselves. I am a body, but I'm also the fire, I'm the earth, and I am the earth into which I shall be eventually scattered, which I hope allows the flowers to grow. This is what I feel art offers to us. Art is life when it is not spoken. It is the unspeakable. It is only what is felt deep inside and far away. I recall here the words of the British-Mexican painter Leonora Carrington from her book Down Below. She said, I realized that my anguish, my mind if you prefer, was painfully trying to unite itself with my body. My mind could no longer manifest itself without producing an immediate effect on my body, on matter. Later, it will exercise itself upon other objects. I was trying to understand this vertigo of mine, that my body no longer obeyed the formulas established in my mind, the formulas of old limited reason, that my will no longer meshed with my faculties of movement. And since my will no longer possessed any power, it was necessary first to liquidate my paralyzing anguish, then to seek an accord between the mountain, my mind, and my body, in order to be able to move around in this new world. My work took a change in direction near a decade ago. It was marked by the encounter with the problem of enforced disappearances in my country, which for most Mexicans is personal. In my country, according to the National Registry of Missing or Disappeared Persons, as for January 2025, 121,582 persons were reported as disappeared as a result of the violence of organized crime in response to the government's strategy of militarized security, as well as violent repression by the state or private groups competing for control of illegal markets, such as prostitution, along with natural resources and land. I think it's important to stress here that I didn't seek to find the problem of disappearance. It entered into my life. Since encountering it, it has changed not only my understanding of life, but how I approach my work. Something that started as a personal and political concern soon became a defining characteristic of my body of work, a body that needed to account for human disappearance. I appreciate I need to be careful about that very description. After all, with disappearance, it is precisely the body that is denied. I first started with a series of drawings, then a series of paintings, which later became the extension of a larger project. Disappearance devours you, but it devours you from within. It cannot be contained, even if my culture does precisely that, by struggling to acknowledge it, nor speaking of it, and not addressing its horror. I do hope that I never lost the artistic intention to do some kind of poetic justice to the issues, not even during the process of the subsequent art exhibitions. To me, it was through its production, that many questions were answered, and a different political meaning of art became apparent. When I embarked in this journey, I began with at least two defining ideas in mind. One, that a painting is a beautifying object that, although it's made out of an intentional study of life through art, it serves no other purpose but the one that was created for. Two, that art can't change the state of the world. Hence, if I am a creator of paintings, These pictures cannot make a tangible transformation when it comes to political issues. Of course, back then, these two ideas came from the experience I had, or rather the learnings that a younger me knew of. I would say that it's still part of a culture which doesn't know what to make of the experienced body that a woman's body can create. Those ideas, I would say, were rather scattered and created a conflict in me. I felt it was not quite right, and experience, like it always does, would teach me some rather tough lessons. As a self-taught painter, who never went to university to study the right and proper way to think about my own practices, I did not have a right definition for politics in regards to the politics of art, nor did I have the vocabulary to explain what creation truly means, though I didn't know I could do it. What is more, I was certainly confused by what activism meant and how it was done. And crucially, I would say the word transformation was something I had no idea how to do out of a canvas. I no longer see these ideas as debilitating. Instead, I prefer to see them as puzzles. When I did some digging around, I found out that puzzles used to be called dissected puzzles, pieces that are part of one, but they have been separated. Whereas the term jigsaw makes its reference to a saw with a blade which is used especially for cutting curves and creating those fragmented or dissected pieces. If my mind has changed, it is perhaps because I now see the pieces differently. Perhaps the one I won't be able to touch upon will be my thinking on activism. To not leave that one behind, I will quickly say that to me, true activism is an activism. I have met many activists in my life. True activism is an activity which implies you to be in a dangerous physical state, where you are actively and persistently involved with the subject matter in order to demand specific changes. This subject in itself demands true care, since, for example, according to the NGO Global Witness, at least 193 people were murdered in 2023 around the world for defending their land and the environment. 85% of those murders were perpetrated in Latin America. Many of these people defend their communities against mining exploitation, water resources, or cooperated businesses or urban centers and various other biodiversity issues. Some are always looking to move forward through the so-called progress with a brutal abuse of power. The new inventions, the new advancements, the new world that is never satisfied. We are always floating among different cultures, especially in an age where technology has invented other mediums where information can be rapidly accessed, even if communication still remains at human level speed. Our engagements with the world have dramatically changed in the last century, especially in the later decades. New technologies like various social media or tools like Google, the consumption of goods, and the way our institutional services are provided has shaped our understanding of life and has transformed the ways we communicate. We must remember we still share the planet with generations where these technologies were inexistent. I didn't have access to the internet, for example, or a mobile until I was 15. My parents until their 40s, my grandmother never did. It is easy to get distracted by gazing only to the future, to focus only on the new generations with no consideration to the rest. But the ethical thing to do, and the hardest, is to care for all of them. Perhaps part of my worry today is that too much of our focus of the liberation of women concerns the future, using the past only as an example to fight against. No doubt we will learn sharpening our gaze, but the constraints might always be ahead unless we decide not to end our puzzles and instead be always parting to the next one. In a way, they are a form of abandonment, an uncompleted path for the sake of taking a different journey without realizing the damage left behind. I know that I am about I know that what I'm about to say contradicts this statement, because art to me does exactly this. It's always parting. It refuses the clear paths and the the finished pieces. But let me see if I can clarify this and express my points a bit better. Can you remember the two shapes I described earlier on the shelf of the snail? Two opposites in one, the line and the circle, the horizon and the interior vortex. I think the shapes of art are done to show us to be a rupture, to show us how to be a rupture, a break that harms no one. A violent rupture that disrupts, but it doesn't create more practices of violence. It has no social damage. The shapes in art are obscure, yet all too real. Their ghostly presence fills the void, shape-shifting, yet appearing with uncertain clarity from a time within time. Nietzsche was right, we do need art to prevent us from dying from the truth. Art could offer us a resistance from the future in the present, drawing its energies from the past while instigating an affirmative movement from the abstract to the real. This is the very act of creation which positions itself against the pessimism of the defeated. To end, I would like to read something that has been inspired by so many people, but in particular by a woman I can't name, but also for the so many brave ones that have seen themselves caught in the storms of violence. Inspired by her stories and courageous endeavors to continue regardless to the constant humiliations and injustices brought to their door. To all of you, keep at it. We can create a better life. Working with my husband, soulmate, collaborator, Professor Evans, I have written this piece that ends with a poem to accompany one of my paintings called Collapse of Consciousness. For all those people who resist and are still looking for answers, I hope they soon reach the path they are looking for. Going to jump into the last image. Wow, this was too slow, actually. It had more images of this. Go on. There was once a cave with its echoes, coldness, and the sound of water rushing over the stones as I walked in. There was a sense of reclusion, and yet I was never at ease. Was I being haunted? Is there a primordial fear, a primordial place? Do you go there to tell stories, secrets, or to forget about them? To have a distance and solitude from any human invention? To begin by destroying the beginning? Do you know where it all began? There were always the seconds you could have changed. There were always the seconds you could have changed, and the moment you couldn't see coming. The time you were trying to track down was never yours, and it also dies every time the sorrows of your pain are liberated. There is no fire but the warmth of your own body, which dissipates as your solitude echoes in this cold cave. You have to trace a line on the stone to sketch the beginning, since there is nothing else you know at this point but the story of your own life. How can we not feel the weight of this absence? How can our consciousness not collapse when confronting the force of such a tremendous nothing? Everything ends like it began, in the mind. The last witness facing the final reckoning. And so she stands alone, with nothing left except her thoughts. Is she anything without the other? venturing for one last time into the abyss where everything had been thrown. She sees how the depths of its denials were so monstrous, even the most brutal tyrants were willing to be forgotten for fear of confronting the intolerable madness. There is nothing to make sense of within this terrain. Surveying the ruins of her mental landscape, alone, she sees how everything meaningful has collapsed. Even notions of past, present, and future have been fully obliterated. Can she even call herself a survivor? Surely, that would mean bearing witness. Yet how can you be a witness if there is nobody left to tell? And what would she say anyway? Even language has been eviscerated. A disappearance that refuses to vanish beneath the weight of absence, a subconscious trace of an abstract memory that breathes fire into the ruins of the mind's blackened eye. Seekers always find a way to reimagine the world, even upon shards of broken glass. She feels, sensing that there is the glimmer of something. In the shadow, at the dark side of consciousness, something refuses to die. I am not wise. My strength sometimes trembles. I find it hard to breathe because I feel as if every breath is you. The memory of us vanishes. Maybe I am a stealer of air. I remove your only breath. I live and you die. The light hurts my eyes closed. You are a dark abyss, floating in an empty space. I can't walk to you. I can't move. I paralyzed. With eyes wide open, I see you. The lips don't move. I talk to you. Our childhood, our voices cleared. My body still, tired. I ask for help. Your fault, denial. You are death. They saw everything, I know nothing. Furious turmoils, broken pavements, humiliating debris. Surrounded by smoke, our heads burst. Collapsing. Collapse. A wandering mind, memories attract, and they will keep you alive. Forget, don't forget. Disappeared. I am waiting in here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Chantal, and wow, what a way to start the morning. Just please speak among your neighbours.